Lies smell like expensive perfume. Truth smells like smoke from burnt bridges. But the most dangerous thing is what hides in the pause between the ticks of the clock. Keep your eyes on the screen. The ending will make your heart stop. My name is Ethan Cole. 3 years ago, Clara and I stood on the rooftop of our Brooklyn apartment, champagne flutes in hand, celebrating her promotion to VP of Operations. The city lights blurred below us like distant stars, but her smile outshone them all. "This is just the beginning," she'd said, her voice trembling with ambition. I believed her. I always did. For 6 years, I'd been her anchor, the quiet force behind her meteoric rise. When she worked late, I left dinners warming in the oven. When she traveled for conferences, I fed her cat and watered her orchids. I told myself this was love. Sacrifice without complaint, loyalty without conditions. But the higher Clara climbed, the colder the air became. Her laughter, once as frequent as summer rain, dried up. She started wearing new perfumes, sharp, citrus scents that smelled nothing like the lavender oil she used to dab on her wrists. When I asked about the changes, she'd wave me off. "You're overthinking, Ethan? It's just work." The night it began, I was fixing her laptop, a frozen screen she'd tossed at me with an irritated sigh. As the device whirred to life, a notification flashed: Marcus, 9:15 p.m. The name of her CEO. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. Clara was in the shower, singing a Taylor Swift song she'd hated since college. The messages were innocent at first. "See you at the meeting. Thanks for the coffee." But then, between spreadsheets and scheduling conflicts, I found it. A photo of Clara's hand resting on Marcus's wrist at a steakhouse we'd never visited. Her caption: "Wish you were here." The bathroom door creaked open. Steam curled into the room like ghostly fingers. "Did you fix it?" she asked, towel drying her hair. I closed the laptop. "Yeah," I said. "It's working fine now." That night, I lay awake studying the cracks in our ceiling plaster. They formed a map of nowhere, jagged lines leading to dead ends. Clara slept turned away, her back a fortress. I thought about waking her, about screaming, about begging. Instead, I slid out of bed and packed a duffel bag, 3 shirts, my passport, the vintage Rolex my father left me. At the door, I hesitated. The cat rubbed against my leg, purring. "Sorry, buddy," I whispered. "You're her cat now." The elevator dinged, a hollow sound that echoed in the 3 a.m. silence. I texted my lawyer as I walked. "File the papers. Don't call her." My thumb hovered over Clara's number. For a heartbeat, I wanted to crumble, to return to warmth, to unsee what I'd seen. I deleted her contact. Portland's rain blurred the windows of my new loft, a raw, industrial space I'd chosen precisely because it felt nothing like our Brooklyn home. Antique clock parts littered my workbench, gears, springs, faces frozen at wrong hours. Restoring time had become my therapy. The first support group meeting was tonight. I'd rented a back room at Powell's Books, stapled flyers to coffee shop boards. Broken trust, survivors of betrayal. A cynical part of me laughed at the word survivors, as if infidelity were a natural disaster, not a choice. At 7 p.m., only 3 people arrived. A 20-something barista clutching a chai latte. A gray-haired woman with a wedding ring tan line. And him, Mark, a former colleague of Clara's. His presence felt like a grenade tossed into the room. "Heard about your divorce," he'd said earlier at the coffee urn. "Clara's a legend at the office now." Sleeping her way to the corner suite, the barista spoke first. He swore it was just texting. Then I found the hotel key. Her voice cracked like old porcelain. The gray-haired woman stared at her hands. 40 years. 2 kids. He left me for his CrossFit trainer. Mark smirked. "You want to heal? Burn their shit." Literally, He pulled out a Zippo, flipped it open. Works every time. I cleared my throat. We're here to rebuild. Not revenge. Rebuild what? Mark leaned forward. You moved across the country, Cole. Changed your name on LinkedIn. You're hiding, same as us. The accusation hung like smoke. I gripped a clock gear from my pocket, my father's Rolex still broken. I'm here because loyalty shouldn't be a death sentence, I said. But neither should grief. Later, in the loft's hollow silence, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A Brooklyn area code. Ethan? Her voice was a shard of glass. I need to tell you something. Rain tapped Morse code on the windows. I stared at the half-restored clock on my wall, its hands stuck at 2:47, the exact hour I'd left her. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The gear slipped from my fingers, rolled under the workbench. And it's yours. The timing, it's yours. A shaky breath. Marcus left. The board found out about his habits. They demoted me to a cubicle. I closed my eyes. Saw Clara at 23, pressing my palm to her stomach after our first pregnancy scare. We'll name her Rose, she joked, crying laughing. What do you want from me, Clara? A second chance, she said. For her. I stood in Washington Park at dawn, watching joggers trace the same paths Clara and I once walked. Her voice haunted my headphones, a voicemail saved under unanswered. The doctor says 8 weeks. You can check the dates, Ethan. It's yours. A mallard paddled past, trailed by ducklings. I hurled a pebble into the pond, shattering their formation. Guilt coiled in my chest. This child, if it existed, was innocent. But so was I when I vowed to love her forever. My phone buzzed. Mark. Group's going to the coast tomorrow. You in? I typed no, then deleted it. Maybe. He replied with a photo. The support group huddled around a bonfire, burning ex-partner's letters. Flames licked a pink envelope I recognized, Clara's handwriting. Back in the loft, I attacked the 19th century grandfather clock from Craigslist. Its pendulum lay dismembered, brass teeth clogged with decades of dust. My restoration notes mocked me. Every mechanism can be repaired with patience. The ultrasound photo arrived at 3 a.m. Clara hadn't included a message, just a grainy black and white ellipse. I pinned it beside the clock skeleton. For hours, I measured gear ratios, my hands steady even as my mind fractured. At sunrise, I realized my mistake. I'd installed the escapement backward. The clock ticked erratically, tock-tick, like a heart arrhythmia. My reflection in its glass door showed dark crescents under my eyes. You're becoming him, my father's voice warned. The man who'd abandoned us, his own broken clock collection gathering dust. The Columbia River roared below the steel bridge as I met Clara's lawyer. Wind snatched at the paternity papers. She's requesting co-parenting, the woman shouted over traffic. Joint custody. No child support. I stared at Clause 4B. Father shall attend all prenatal appointments. The signature line gaped like a wound. My pen hovered. Across the river, a cargo ship sounded its horn, a deep, mournful bellow. Tell her I'll sign, I said, on one condition. The lawyer's phone recorded my terms. No contact beyond medical updates. No second chances. No illusions. Back home, I reopened the support group's Facebook page. Mark had posted, today's lesson. Burn the bridges, keep the ashes. I deleted the account. In its place, I created a new group, The Repaired. The grandfather clock chimed midnight as I began drafting my first post. You don't fix time by rewinding it. You build something new from what's left. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and false hope. Clara sat in the waiting room, her posture rigid as if carved from the same marble as the hospital floors. She clutched a folder labeled prenatal care, the edges frayed, corners bent. I took the seat farthest from her, my boots echoing in the sterile silence. A wall clock ticked like a metronome, each second a reminder of time's indifference. When the nurse called her name, Clara hesitated. For a heartbeat, I saw her hand tremble. Then she stood, smoothing her blouse over a stomach still flat with secrets. The ultrasound room was cold, the gel on her skin shimmering under fluorescent lights. The technician's monitor flickered to life, revealing a grainy, rhythmic pulse. Strong heartbeat, she said. Clara's breath hitched. My throat tightened. That sound, a relentless thump, 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 was the first truth we'd shared in months. I left before the printout finished. Outside, rain blurred Portland into a watercolor. A text buzzed. Thank you for coming. I deleted it. By dusk, the story trended on Twitter. A grainy photo of Clara's ultrasound, my face pixelated beside her. The headline, Disgraced XX Love Child. Who's the dad? Mark had sold the story. Comments erupted like a virus. Homewrecker deserves this. He's no saint either. My workshop became a war room. Reporters camped outside, their cameras flashing through barred windows. I dismantled clocks with violent precision, gears scattering like shrapnel. The voicemail, light blinked, Clara 7 times. I played the last one. They're saying you forced me to keep it. We need to fix this. At midnight, I posted a single tweet. Some wounds don't heal clean, but they're mine to carry. Attached was the ultrasound image unblurred. Let them dissect my pain. I owed no one a performance. In the attic, I found my father's toolbox. Beneath rusted wrenches lay an envelope yellowed by decades. His handwriting spidered across the paper. To my son, clocks lie. They pretend time is orderly. But real healing is messy. Don't repeat my mistakes. A key taped to the letter fit the 18th century chronometer I'd salvaged. Inside its belly, hidden behind the moon phase dial, was a photograph, my father holding a newborn me, his smile unguarded. On the back, smudged ink, first day, we were just us. Rain bled against the skylight. I cradled the chronometer, its weight familiar. Clara's child would never know this version of me, the man before the fracture. But maybe that was mercy. I began repairing the chronometer, not to erase its scars, but to let them speak. The new support group met in an old church basement, its stained glass windows boarded up after a storm. 20 faces now crowded the folding chairs, teachers, nurses, a retired cop gripping a thermos of black coffee. I'd stopped calling them survivors. We were archaeologists now, sifting through ruins of trust. A woman named Lila spoke first. He took the dog, she said, staring at her scuffed sneakers. Sent me a photo of them at the beach. The bastard even bought Rex a bandana. The group chuckled, a brittle sound. I passed around my father's chronometer, its repaired gears humming. We're not fixing the past, I said. We're learning to tell time in the wreckage. Later, Lila lingered. My ex-husband's a lawyer, she said, sliding me a business card. He could sue Mark for leaking your story. Pro bono. I tucked it into my toolbox next to Clara's ultrasound. Justice felt like another clock to dismantle. Flames engulfed the church at 3 a.m. Firefighters fished charred clock parts from the ashes. My grandfather clock's face blackened. Hands melted at 11:04. The arson investigator found gasoline traces and a Zippo engraved M. Clara called as I sifted through debris. I saw the news, she said. You shouldn't be alone right now. A siren wailed in the background. For a heartbeat, I imagined her driving through the night, swollen with consequences. Why do you care? I asked. Because I'm still your wife on paper, she said. Because the baby kicks when she hears your voice. I hung up, crushing a burnt gear under my boot. The church's crucifix lay in the mud, its gold paint peeling like old lies. The loft stank of smoke and regret. I drafted a statement for the press, words dissolving into ink blots. The fire was a setback, but backspace. Some wounds never. Delete. Lila's lawyer called. Mark's in custody. They found his prints on the lighter. I pictured him in an interrogation room, smugness crumbling. Drop the charges, I said. Why? Because I'm not his keeper. At dawn, I rebuilt the grandfather clock with salvage parts. Its new face bore cracks I didn't hide, its chime deeper, mournful. The ultrasound photo curled at the edges. I pressed it between glass and brass, a relic in the clock's chest. Let time decide what to do with it. Rain lashed the city for 9 straight days, turning streets into rivers. Clara's due date loomed like a phantom limb, present aching, impossible to ignore. My repaired clocks grew erratic, their ticks syncing with thunderclaps. The chronometer's moon phase dial stuck on a waning crescent, its silver surface tarnished by humidity. Lila appeared at my workshop door, drenched and clutching a manila envelope. Mark's out on bail, she said, water pooling at her feet. He's blaming you for the fire. Says you set it up to play the martyr. Inside the envelope were photos. Me salvaging clock parts from the church ruins, my face gaunt under a police floodlight. I slid them into a drawer. Let him talk. Lies rust faster than truth. You're a fool, she said, but her voice softened. Or maybe the rest of us are just tired fools. The hospital called at midnight. Clara's voice, thin and fractured, leaked through the receiver. Preeclampsia. They're inducing labor early. A monitor beeped in the background. I drove through flooded roads, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle. The maternity ward glowed like a spaceship in the storm. Nurses eyed my soaked clothes as I slumped into a plastic chair. Clara's room hummed with machines, her silhouette distorted behind a curtain. A doctor emerged, gloves smeared with something metallic. 32 weeks. She's asking for you. I stood at the threshold. Clara's hand rested on a glass incubator, its tiny occupant wired to blinking machines. They named her Rose, she whispered. The name hung between us, sharp as broken glass. Dawn stained the sky bruised purple. I sat in the NICU, Rose's miniature hand curled around my index finger. Her skin was translucent, veins mapping a fragile universe. Nurses moved like ghosts, adjusting tubes and monitors. Clara slept fitfully down the hall, her 4 drip keeping time. I opened my father's letter, its creases worn soft. Real healing is messy. Mark's trial began at 9 a.m. Reporters clustered outside the courthouse, microphones raised like weapons. I sent Lila's lawyer a text. Testify on Mark's behalf. Are you insane? She called immediately. Tell them I forgave him, I said. Even if it's a lie? Back in the NICU, Rose's monitor stuttered. I placed the chronometer beside her incubator, its repaired gears whispering. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Time, for once, sounded gentle. Rose's incubator became my new workshop. By day, I repaired clocks in the NICU's dim glow, their ticks syncing with her heart monitor. Nurses joked I built a time zone for fighters. Tiny fists pressed against glass, Rose fought sleep like it was the enemy. I whispered secrets to her through latex gloves. Clocks lie, but you're the truest thing I've ever made. Clara visited at dusk, her silhouette framed in the doorway. She'd linger, perfume clashing with antiseptic, but never crossed the threshold. One night, she left a stuffed rabbit with a wind-up heart. I let it play until the tinny melody died. Rose's eyelids fluttered as if dreaming of better lullabies. The chronometer's final gear clicked into place on Rose's 1-month milestone. Its restored chime startled the night nurse. Sounds like a church bell, she said. I pressed it to Rose's incubator, letting vibrations ripple through her. It's a truth bell, I murmured. Rings when we stop lying to ourselves. Clara found me polishing my father's toolbox. They're discharging her next week, she said, voice frayed. I signed the papers. Full custody's yours. Her wedding band left a pale stripe on her finger. You were right. She deserves better than half love. I slid the chronometer into its case. It wasn't about deserving. It was about surviving. She reached for Rose's chart, her hand briefly eclipsing our daughter's name. Tell her I'll tell her you gave her your stubbornness, I said, and that it's okay to outgrow the people who break you. Homecoming day. I swaddled Rose in a blanket stitched with clock faces, her cries muffled against my chest. The loft smelled of fresh paint and simmering formula. Sunlight pierced boarded windows, striping the floor with gold. Lila arrived with a crib, her truck double-parked outside. Got it from a couple who reconciled, she said, assembling bars that gleamed with second chances. We didn't speak of fires or trials. When she left, she pressed a note into Rose's blanket. Time's a circle, not a line. Break it better than we did. At midnight, I wound the chronometer and placed it in Rose's room. Its chime harmonized with her breaths, a lullaby of scars and steel. Downstairs, Clara's unopened letters piled up like fallen leaves. I burned none of them. Let time weather their edges. Let forgiveness be a choice, not a demand. The grandfather clock struck 3. Rose stirred, her fist unfurling in sleep. I traced her palm lines, roads leading somewhere I couldn't yet see. Outside, Portland slept. Inside, we were awake. Rose's laughter became the metronome of my days. At 2 years old, she dismantled my workshop with the focus of a seasoned engineer, tiny fingers unscrewing dials and scattering springs. I let her. Better to learn early that broken things hold secrets. Her first word wasn't "eta" but tick-tock, uttered while pressing her ear to a Victorian mantel clock. Clara's postcards arrived like clockwork, postmarked from cities I'd never heard her mention. Barcelona smells like burnt sugar. One read, I'm working in a hostel. Sweeping floors. It's honest. I stored them in the chronometer's hidden compartment, next to my father's letter. Rose traced the inked landscapes, calling them Mama's pretend places. I didn't correct her. On Thursdays, we visited the rebuilt church. The support group had outgrown the basement, spilling into the nave. Lila taught Rose to stack gears into unstable towers. She's got your hands, Lila said, watching her balance a brass cog on a hairpin. But her smile's all Clara. I said nothing. Let the clock speak for me. Rain sheeted the windows the night Marcus appeared. His tailored suit hung loose, eyes shadowed by failures I didn't care to name. Rose slept upstairs, her nightlight casting dinosaur shapes on the ceiling. She's dying, he said, rainwater pooling at his Italian loafers. Leukemia. Wants to see the kid. The chronometer's pendulum swayed on my workbench. I polished its weights with a rag soaked in turpentine. Rose isn't a souvenir. You think I want this? His cufflinks glinted, monogrammed MR, the same initials as the lighter that burned my life down. She's got no one. The treatments wiped her savings. I slid a repaired pocket watch across the table. Sell this. It's worth 6 months of honesty. He left without touching it. The watch ticked alone until dawn. We buried Clara under a maple tree's dappled light. No priest, just Lila humming Blackbird and Rose dropping dandelions into the grave. The hospice nurse handed me a sealed envelope. She wrote this when the morphine let her. Inside, a child's drawing. Stick figure me holding a giant clock, Rose flying superhero style above it. Underneath Clara's shaky script. Tell her I chose the sky. That night, I wound every clock in a house. Their chorus woke Rose, who padded downstairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Too loud, Dada," she complained, climbing into my lap. "Listen closer," I said. The clocks disagreed, grandfather clock booming, cuckoo clock chirping, chronometers oceanic chimes. Yet beneath the chaos, a rhythm emerged. Imperfect, persistent, alive. Rose pressed her palm to my chest. "Same as your heartbeat," she declared. Outside, the maple leaves whispered secrets to the stars. Inside, we measured time by better things. 15 years later, Rose's hands moved like mine once did, deliberate, patient, resurrecting a 17th century tower clock abandoned in a Seattle museum. Her hair, streaked with Clara's copper, fell over blueprints as she cursed in 3 languages. "Pendulum's off by 2 degrees, she muttered, squinting through an engineer's loop. I watched from the workshop door, my own hands stiff with arthritis. The chronometer hung above her desk, its chime now syncopated with her phone's notifications. She'd added modern gears to its ancient heart, a hybrid of then and now. Lila's funeral notice arrived that morning. Cancer, swift and unapologetic. Rose found me rereading the obituary, my finger tracing the lines survived by no one. She pried the paper away, replacing it with a screwdriver. "Fix the escapement with me," she ordered. Grief, she'd learned, could be disassembled. The package arrived postmarked from Barcelona, battered but stubborn. Inside, a stack of Clara's journals, wrapped in moth-eaten silk. Rose hovered as I lifted the first one, its pages smelling of salt and regret. "Burn them," she said, jaw tight. She doesn't get to explain. But Clara hadn't written explanations. The journals were time capsules, sketches of Rose at every age, imagined from oceans away. A toddler chasing pigeons, a teen scowling over calculus. On the final page, a watercolor of the loft's clocks captioned, "I broke time. You rebuilt it better." Rose stayed up all night painting her reply on the museum clock's face. A phoenix rising from gears. At dawn, security guards threatened arrest. She grinned through their scolding, spray paint staining her palms. "Worth it," she told me, eyes brighter than any flame. The museum gala buzzed with champagne and hollow praise. Rose's restored clock dominated the hall, its pendulum sweeping shadows across billionaires. She gripped my arm as the curator praised her innovative homage to fractured histories. "Bullshit," she whispered. "It's about stubbornness." We escaped to the roof, Portland's skyline glittering like a stolen necklace. Rose produced 2 flasks, hot chocolate spiked with peppermint schnapps. "To Lila," she toasted. "And all the broken things she helped us love." Wind snatched our laughter, scattering it over the city. Below, the clock struck midnight, its chime reverberating through bones and concrete. Rose leaned her head on my shoulder, the way she'd done since the NICU. "You know what's funny?" she said. "The chronometer's still wrong. Gains 3 minutes daily." I sipped my cocoa, warmth spreading through old scars. "Or maybe it's finally right," she snorted, but later I caught her adjusting her wristwatch to match the chronometer's lie. Time, we'd learned, wasn't a truth to obey, just a story to outlive. At 3 a.m., Rose shook me awake in the guest suite. Moonlight sharpened her features, Clara's ghost in her urgency. "The clock stopped," she said. "We found it frozen at 11:04, the same hour the church burned." Rose kicked off her heels, crawling into the gear chamber with a flashlight. "Mainspring snapped," she called, voice echoing. "Needs a full rebuild." I handed her tools through the access panel, my breath shallow. She emerged smeared with grease, cradling the broken spring like a wounded bird. "We'll melt it down," she decided. "Make something new." Outside, the city slept. Inside, we worked until dawn, not fixing but forging. The first bird song found us polishing a new pendulum, its surface etched with Rose's phoenix and Lila's dates. "Ready?" Rose asked, hand on the winding key. The clock roared to life, its voice deeper, wiser. We stepped back as shadows danced across our faces, not prisoner and warden, but co-conspirators. Time, we'd learned, doesn't heal. It simply leaves room for better scars. One story may be ending, but the excitement never stops. Don't wait, jump right into the next one and keep the thrill alive.